Now, every company will become a technology company over time if they're not now. I think I've also read something like 80% of AI initiatives fail. And I think that's because they're not bringing the engineers into those projects or programs or initiatives early enough. They're not explaining the why, and they're not getting those engineers to add value to the overall objective. I was very blessed to work with an amazing engineer for over 12 years, and he got so mad at me because initially I would put him on the phone with our customers. I wanted him to hear what they had to say, and I wanted him to hear directly from them what their pain points were. And he would make faces at me while we were on the phone, but it really helped him start to understand why we were making the decisions that we were making and how what he could do every single day really delivered on the overall value of the company.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Leadership Exchange podcast. My name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLead or on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. And I'm here joined with Karyn Mullins today, who is a fractional executive with TechCTO. Welcome, Karyn.
Welcome to me. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to finally have you on. I know we've been hanging out for, gosh, it feels like longer than that, but I think we've only known each other for about a year now, so it hasn't been that long.
Surely it's been longer than that. I have to
No,
believe.
I'm
Really?
pretty sure it's only been a year. Yeah. How wild, right?
It is wild, but you're so busy. You create so many wonderful opportunities for people to connect that I think those relationships feel deeper, perhaps, than you
Yes,
wouldn't created those opportunities. So, thank
I
you for
love
that. I'm
that.
glad to have known you.
Yes. Well, so excited to have you on today. And, I previously knew you. I was first introduced to you when you were a CTO at Jackson Healthcare.
Yes.
I love that you're bringing sort of that sort of like CTO type knowledge as well to sort of all the fractional work you do as well. And I think one of the most exciting things that you said to me before was this whole idea that engineers need to stay close to the money to be successful. So, what does that actually mean?
I'll tell you, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, Tracy. So, I do have a background in technology, as you mentioned, but also operations and marketing. And so,
Hmm.
very early on in my career, I was in a marketing role, and senior leader in the sales team said to me, the best career advice I can give you is to always stay close to the money. She said, as a marketing person early in your career, you get excited by the creativity. And I'll date myself. This is back when we still did print ads. And you think designing the ad is the end all be all. And she said, but if you don't understand how that ad drives business, if you don't understand how you deliver financial value through the different marketing activities that you're undertaking, you're really not making an impact and you won't grow. And I'll be honest, at the time, I was a little taken aback, but it turned out to be really, really great advice. And as I have grown in my career and moved more into that technology sphere, I've been able to work with some engineers who are very business savvy, and I've been able to work with some who really just want to focus on building what they're told to build. And I can see the difference in the impact that they make to the overall business based off which side of that fence they fall on. And I think in today's world where technology is moving at such a fast pace, where AI can automate so many things, the way that engineers can really add value is to make sure they understand the business context of what they're doing. And I just think it's a great opportunity for them at this time.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I can't remember who I was interviewing, but we did one episode of the Leadership Exchange podcast back a while ago, and she was saying that she basically had sort of like key initiatives, and every single ticket, sort of even down to sort of like a QA ticket or something like that, right? Would have a tag to what business impact or business value it was adding, which
Right.
I thought was such a smart way to get everybody within an organization sort of rallying behind, okay, this is the purpose of why I'm doing this versus, oh, I just need to knock out two or three tickets here and there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. But you got to go one step further, Tracy, and explain what those tags mean and why they're important, obviously.
Yeah.
I've done some fractional work as a project manager helping a company integrate 4 different acquisitions. And they've tied all of those back to the 5 strategic goals of the company. But when you talk to some of the feet on the street and some of the engineers, they're not necessarily fully in the loop on what all of those strategic programs look like and why what they're doing ultimately adds value and creates a success. So I think you've got
Mm.
to not only just tag them, but make sure that you're bringing those engineers into the conversation and helping them understand the higher level scope.
That's so true. I can't count how many conversations I've had with engineers that sort of say, well, they're never really clear. It just comes down from the top. Like,
Yeah.
I guess we're doing this now, right? And they throw their hands up. So you said that right now it's really important for engineers to sort of understand that. Like, what is so important about it now?
Well, I do think it's always been important, like we said, but I think
Mm.
very significantly at this period in time, there are so many ways that companies are looking to improve. And technology is such a driver of almost all of those initiatives. I think I don't remember the exact statistic, but a lot of articles have been written on how every company will become a technology company over time if they're not now. I think I've also read something like 80% of AI initiatives fail the first time. And I
Mm.
think that's because they're not bringing the engineers into those projects or programs or initiatives early enough. They're not explaining the why, and they're not getting those engineers to add value to the overall objective. I was very blessed to work with an amazing engineer for over 12 years. And he got so mad at me because initially I would put him on the phone with our customers. I wanted him to hear what they had to say, and I wanted him to hear directly from them what their pain points were. And he would make faces at me while we were on the phone because this was a little bit before Zoom. Um, Calls were so prevalent, but it really helped him start to understand why we were making the decisions that we were making and how what he could do every single day really delivered on the overall value of the company. And ultimately, it just turned into such an amazing relationship where, we'd sit in a room and I would throw out an idea. And at this point, I was the president of the company. And he would say, hey, well, look, you didn't think about this or you didn't think about that. And if you tell me what problem you want to solve, I'll engineer you the right solution. But we couldn't have gotten there if he didn't really understand what we were trying to accomplish and how his role was impactful. And so I think that's a great example that is even more important in this day and age, like we said, with the rise of AI and execution becoming the easier variable.
Totally, totally agree. Yes. Engineers always get stuck in the like, we're going to use this technology and it's going to be so great because it's the most forward thinking and blah, 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 blah. But like, does that add business value? I mean, most CTOs you talk to are just saying, look, I just want to get it done. Like, this actually doesn't drive me any revenue. I don't care about a migration. I actually want it to take as short as possible. And like, what's the
Right.
quickest path to get this dealt with?
Yeah, that's so true. But I will say, so this engineer who really
Mhm.
became my poster child, if you will, for trying to figure out how to work with business teams, he now owns his own business
Nice.
and has just done so incredibly well. And he owns 2 breweries. I mean, he figured out how to create a business model, drive the business forward, and create value for his family. And it's just such a great story of how he started when he, as an engineer, really trying to understand how his impact would drive the business forward.
I love that. I love that. Well, speaking of engineers and, there being 10 million different types of engineers out there, how do you actually spot a business savvy engineer? How can you actually tell if somebody is business savvy?
A lot of it, Tracy, is the questions that they ask. So
Uh-huh.
I think a non business savvy engineer will always ask how. How do I build it? What are the steps to build it? What is my next task? Whereas a business savvy engineer or one who wants to learn to be business savvy will ask more questions about the why. Why are we trying to build this? What is the outcome that we're looking for, and why do we care about that outcome? and they'll actually try and figure out how the why behind the what. And so I think that's a great first way. Also, how they build cross functional relationships. If they are, back in the day, we used to joke about how the engineers wanted to sit in a room with the lights off, and not interact with anybody else in the company. I think those days are long gone, but I think it's a good bellwether that we want engineers who want to go meet and be cross functional with their marketing folks and the operations team and the finance colleagues, and really start to build those relationships. And the ones that seek that out are ultimately going to become more business savvy just by those relationships alone. So they may not sit in a room with the lights off anymore, but if they really don't take the initiative to interact with their colleagues in other departments, they're definitely not just demonstrating the desire to be business savvy.
I can actually see that both ways. So it reminds me of, one of my husband, before he was my husband, he was at this company, and, they were joking about engineers just like liking to sit in the basement, but then they moved offices and they stuck the engineers in the basement.
Oh,
Right.
well, that's not fair.
But, so they had their own like little space and whatever. And, I see it both ways, because I still remember my first company, and I was non-technical at the time, so I was CTO. I had a CTO, and I still remember always being like, "Well, you're feeling like, well, you're not enough meetings, and so you're not a part of the team. Like, we need to bring you out more. This, that, right?" But then when I became technical, I was like, "Oh my God, like." I can't believe I was doing that, because I was just interrupting your flow time all the time. So when you say, hey, you need to start building relationships with cross-functional teams and this and that, I'm thinking, okay, I understand the whole basement thing, because then you can just focus and get it done. But then also at the same time, like, if you're not talking to people and having those conversations, which is taking away from you actually executing, right? That balance is actually, like, which one do you do?
That's a really good point, and I think it has to be a balance, to your point. And all types of roles like to get in the flow and stay focused on what they're doing. And so I think that's not a challenge that's only for engineers, but we used to be very, very thoughtful about blocking out time on calendars. And so, these were the heads down work hours, and you didn't go interrupt an engineer. You didn't go ask a question. You didn't send him or her an email during those times. But then we would have a little bit freer, maybe hour or two later in the day, where you would include them in meetings. We used to do a lot of team lunches, as silly as that sounds. And you can even do that in today's more remote environment, right? But schedule the time for people to interact when they're not going to be as heads down anyway. But I do think, to your point, Tracy, you've got to have that balance, because you need people to execute. You don't want them standing in the kitchen talking to each other, whether they're on Zoom or they're in an actual kitchen. But you do need to give them some time and some ability to build those relationships, I think.
I love that. And, again, that was great advice that you gave. This whole how do you spot a business savvy engineer, I think, also appeals to engineers who are looking to be more business savvy, right? Like asking the sort of why am I building it versus the what am I actually building.
Right.
So you gave some examples of how, businesses or business leaders can start sort of like promoting engineers to be more business savvy. What other sort of strategies and tactics do you have?
Well, I think for business leaders, what they really need to understand is the best way to bring engineers into the conversation is to create that culture that embraces technology teams and engineers as strategic partners. I think if they really bring them into the conversation earlier on, like I mentioned with the gentleman I worked with for so long, the ideas that those engineers can bring to the table and the problems that they can solve are just elevated beyond what they can do when you leave them in the basement and just tell them what they're supposed to build and how to do it. And so I think there's a lot of emphasis on leaders at this point to have those conversations, to try and make that strategic cultural shift, and to give engineers the opportunity to have a seat at the table and to be in those conversations. Um, there's a lot of ways that you can teach or coach business experience and business knowledge. And I think it depends on the business that you're in and the culture that you already have in place. But certainly making business impact part of their performance review, helping tie their objectives to the objectives of the business, and then taking the time to explain to them why you're doing that, but also tying it back in terms that they understand, right? Helping them see how they are, their goals are being mapped to that business state. I mean, engineers are data driven people. So, I think it's really important to help them understand how automation, uptime, burn charts relate to your conversion rate, your customer churn. I mean, just talk through that whole scenario with them, and drive that knowledge.
But you saying that reminds me of, one of my first jobs out of college. And I still remember, you get a bonus, and you get a bonus based on sort of like 20% of your bonus is based on the sort of like company goals, right? And so this is an 8,000 person company. And I always looked at it, and probably because I didn't really have a very active manager, right? I was just like, yeah, whatever. That 20% I have no control over, but like it's just there. So it's nice if I get it, right? Versus, if I had somebody actually explaining it to me and helping me understand how I can in my day to day, in an 8,000 person company, like actually make an impact, that would have been much more interesting for sure.
You learned a lot more from that experience. You would have been able to tie those objectives to something that was meaningful to you personally, but then also meaningful to the business. So
Yeah, it would have been more fun too. I would have felt like more purpose, like a game, right? Like you're trying to do something.
right. You're
Yeah.
not just sitting there looking at the very specific granular tasks. You understand what you're building and how that ties. I mean, look, AI can execute in so many ways that we could have never imagined. But what it can't do and it will never do is replace the human decision.
Mm-hmm.
As an engineer, if you understand business, you have the ability to make the right decisions about what problems to solve, what pain points to shoot for, and how to prioritize those. And
Yeah.
technology can't do that for you. You, as the human in the loop, need to be able to make those decisions. And in doing that, you have much greater value to the overall organization.
You're just giving me ideas. I'm like, I mean, because we're a consultancy, right? This dot is a consultancy, and we're always working on our customers' problems. But it'd be so fun actually to do a little hackathon where I got everybody on the team talking about this dot's problems. We do that again with leaders, and most of us are engineers, if not all. Maybe except for two people on the team are engineers, right? But there's people who focus on the business, and then there's people who focus on our customers' business. But that actually sounds like a really fun project to do. So once an engineer sort of understands the business, what do you think they should do with that insight? Like, how do they sort of like help tie their work to the business outcomes more directly?
Well, I think the first thing in understanding the business and making sure they can express that business acumen is they really truly need to understand the company's business model, how they make money, who the customers are, what the key revenue streams are, and the key competitors that they face in that particular market. And in doing that, I think as they interact with cross-functional, team members, or they look at the projects that are already on the to-do list, they're better able to add value, come up with innovative ideas, come up with additional opportunities within that scope to really add value to the overall initiatives and growth of the business. If they don't understand it, then they really can't, right? I mean, I think engineers think in systems and not silos. And right now, if they're in that silo, help them figure out how to broaden past that so that they can have that bigger impact. if you look at customer experience, which is a very hot topic these days, and you think about the way that an engineer can engage in a customer experience project, if they are business savvy, they can add tremendous value and creative ideas for how to solve some of those problems, because marketing can't own the customer experience by itself. Operations can't own it by itself. You've got to have technology involved, and you've got to have the technologists understanding enough of the business to make recommendations. And like you said earlier, not focusing on the shiny, pretty technology. Hey, let's use AI because it's cool. But hey, let's really figure out what's the right combination of technologies that would improve the customer journey and really deliver retention, which ultimately is a business metric.
It's actually kind of funny because I think engineers love technology. I mean, who doesn't love tinkering with technology, right? But then when you filter in AI, and then engineers are getting bombarded with like, do this AI thing, do that AI, do whatever. Engineers sort of have this, this like gut instinct to like cut through the noise. So they're kind of like, stop with this BS and like, let's figure out what it actually means. So it's almost like, because AI is sort of, what do you call it? Like sort of like filtering into everybody's lives. Engineers sort of inherently want to become more business savvy because they don't want to just do silly things to, for no reason, right? Like this whole, like, I think you said 80% of AI projects fail
right
in the first time. So like, after you identify these business savvy engineers and you start treating them more as strategic partners, right, instead of execution arms, what does that actually do to change the business?
I think it really just elevates business outcomes. I think any time you bring cross-functional teams together to help solve a business problem, you get the diversity of thought, you get diversity of experience, and you get diversity of knowledge. And so technologists are going to look at a problem from a very different perspective than a finance executive or a controller or a marketing person. And so I think, given how technology is driving almost every aspect of business these days, as we mentioned, the technologist who understands business, the engineer who really gets it, will have a very different opportunity, not only to help elevate business outcomes, but to also elevate their own career. And in this day and age, with AI definitely creating a lot of automation opportunities, being more focused on the strategy and the strategic objectives of the company, I think is the place, as you mentioned, that engineers are thinking they want to go, but they'll also see the value they can add when they get there.
It really, everything right now is moving so fast. I think it's really changing the game for for all of us. Yes.
It's crazy.
It's fun though, right?
But like you said, engineers, I think because they've just been immersed in it, they're so much better at cutting through the noise.
Yes.
And so, they might have a business leader who said, hey, I went to this Vistage meeting and we got to be doing AI and what are we doing and how do we implement this? And just go do this, because they don't necessarily understand what to do. And that business savvy engineer is going to say, hold on, wait a minute. Let's figure out what problem we're trying to solve, if it's the right problem to use AI for in this example, and then how are we going to define success with it? And ultimately, that's going to be a much more successful implementation than the 80% who just say, hey, we got to do something with AI.
Yeah. It's so funny because I've been, I've been in tech for 10 years now, or been technical, let's say. I've been technical for 10 years now. And I remember when I first started, right, like you have this sort of migrations and things like that happening. It's all about sort of digital transformation. And, and then a few years ago, I don't know, I got kind of bored, to be honest. I was like, well, what's the next thing I should be excited about when it comes to tech, right? And maybe engineers for the past few years have kind of been that way, like a little bit bored because there's not like a lot of, yes, there's business problems to solve, but like there's not like things that are sort of in your face, You know what I'm saying? But then now when it comes to AI, it's like in your face. It's things that you have to solve, and you're sort of like forced to, forced to, you know, forced to be here. Um,
Well, it helps their creativity too. I mean, every great engineer I've ever worked with is incredibly creative in the way that they decide to structure their code or the way that they like to write their code. Be creative at a little bit higher level. I think they're really good at being creative if given the opportunity. So to your point, don't be bored. Figure out how to use that creative skill set that you have in broader ways.
yeah. Are there any examples you can share of where like getting an engineer on early was able to sort of directly change the outcome of a business or like a business strategy or a project?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a conversation a couple of weeks ago with someone, a leader in the clinical operations team of a healthcare system. And this person is a physician by trade, was tasked with implementing an ambient listening solution. So, great. He understands the pain points, he understands the use cases, he understands why it would add value to the organization. But what he didn't know was how to go find the best solution. And so he actually partnered with someone in their IT department who, to be honest, by themselves as an engineer might not have understood the pain points to the same degree. And I think together those two decided the best path forward that would deliver value the most quickly and prove why that technology would have an impact to patient experience and physician experience as well. And so he was telling me, his department exists to help work with the engineering department. And he has found that the engineers that really seek and lean into that clinical operations team are the ones that drive the most successful outcomes. And so I think that's a great example of the business engineering partnership. And I have a good friend who's actually a PA in that health system, and he called me so excited. We got the greatest thing ever, and you're not going to believe what it does. And I mean, he's a PA. He's not technology savvy to the extreme. And when I told him, how do you think you got there? He really didn't. He knew about the clinical operations team, but he didn't know about the partnering on the engineering side. And so that engineer really was able to drive success for my friend. And I think just that partnership proved to be super impactful for that healthcare organization.
I love that. It is very exciting to see what's happening with healthcare right now and AI and I mean just all the smart hospital stuff as well. Which reminds me, I do need to invite you to this event I'm hosting. So I will put on a note to send you a link to that.
Another one. I don't know when
I
you find
know.
the time.
I don't either. But it's going to be a really great one. You should invite your friends too. But anyways, a point for another day.
Absolutely.
So getting to sort of like more tactical advice, right, for engineers and business leaders. Let's start off with engineers. Like, what are sort of three things that engineers can do this quarter to become more business savvy?
Well, look, like we talked about, really understand the business that you're in. Understand how the company makes money, understand who the key customers are, revenue streams, that sort of thing. We already talked about building those cross functional relationships. I think it's easy to discount that step, but I do think it's super important because you'll just gain that knowledge and experience by interacting with those colleagues. And my third piece of advice would really be to get closer to the customer. Do what you can to be on a support call, be on a sales call, talk to the customer directly. I mean, as I mentioned, my engineer was pretty mad the first time I put him on the phone with a customer, but ultimately it really helped expand his thinking. And I think it was something he would say was helpful. So those would be my top three recommendations for engineers. And as you do those things, the knowledge will start to come.
It has been increasingly, I've heard that engineers, a lot of executives are sort of requiring, technology executives are sort of requiring engineers to do rotations for it in customer support, which I think is amazing. And I love that it's sort of becoming commonplace in our industry. Talking about sort of business and tech leaders as well, how can they sort of start encouraging alignment between engineering and business?
I think a great place to start as a leader, whether you're a technology leader or a business leader, is start with the why. So really explain the why behind the projects, explain the tie to the strategic company objectives, and bring those engineers into that conversation earlier on. I think, as we said earlier, make the business impact part of their performance review. If you explain it to them and then you hold them accountable for it, you're really helping to drive that knowledge and driving the behaviors that you're looking for to gain more business savviness. I think you need to reward curiosity. I think really help engineers feel welcome in asking questions, exploring ideas, and really value that behavior because curiosity is a great innovator. And so I think those are some great things to do. And then obviously just make sure that as it works both ways, you're explaining to the business team why it's important for them to become more technology savvy.
So funny because a lot of the advice you give, if you sort of take that advice and you put it in other areas, right? Like um, inclusivity comes to mind.
Yeah.
Like basically teams and organizations and leaders need to sort of create more inclusive teams, right? You talk about these cross-functional, being more inclusive with your engineers, for
Yeah.
example. So I really love that. Any last bits of advice for us?
I would say embrace the time and the technology times that we're in and use it to your advantage. I think it's a great time to be an engineer and it's a great time to really add value to the company that you work for. So everything is moving so fast, as we've said, but engineers are so uniquely positioned to help cut through all of that and really hone in on what's going to have the biggest business impact. And so as engineers, it's your time. Just take it and run.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Karyn, how do we find you online?
Well, thanks so much for having me. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I do check that on a regular basis.
Okay, amazing. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks, everyone.